Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So in today's show, I'm going to start out and show you how I would go about building a case to improve my win rate. And really the idea behind it is to reduce your loss rate in reality, because we're trying to find something wrong with the trade, really. And if we do, then we kind of say, you know what, I'm not taking this. We're going to try and find stocks that are really A plus, maybe B plus type patterns, and they're fitting all of our criteria. So let's go ahead and get into this agenda. So in order to increase your win rate, we're going to do a couple things. Number one, we're going to focus on multiple time frames and make sure we have a confluence where we don't have anything in one time frame telling us that it's not going to work, right? I mean, if we can get three different time frames working together, that increases our likelihood of having a win. And then there are some key confirmation points that I'm going to talk about here briefly. I'm not going to go in total depth, but I think it'll give you an idea of what types of things you need to do. And in order to do, and what we're trying to do is really just build a case for a winning trade. So let's go ahead and get into this lesson now. Okay, for this lesson, I'm going to use AMD. I've got 4 time frames up. I'm really only going to use 3: monthly, weekly, daily. And the key time frame is the trade time frame, the middle time frame here. And I'm going to go through that extensively. But we also want to look at the upper time frame. So if we're looking at this as a potential trade, we want to look up. And then ultimately, we're going to look down for entry. Now, let's just start with the monthly chart and take a quick peek at this, because we're looking to do this right in this zone in here. All right, it's on this month after it had dropped down and come back up. That's where on the weekly chart it's looking attractive. So what we're trying to do on this upper time frame, because we've got 3 time frames. We've got the upper time frame, right? We've got the trade time frame, or the main time frame, which I call the higher time frame. And then we've got the lower time frame for entry and timing. Just to improve timing, lower risk, right? So this, I don't know if this makes sense, but high time frame, low time frame. You should, majority of what you're doing when you're trading in multiple time frames should be these 2 time frames. You want to look up, which is what we're going to do here on the monthly, just to make sure you're not, really doing anything that it flies right in the face of big problems. So let's just look at a few things that help us build this case for doing a trade. So the first thing is that if you notice on a MACD basis, this had turned up, this MACD. So we were straddling the line. The signal line was above 0 and the MACD was below. So this is in the area of what I would consider to be like a 0 line reversal. What was important is that the fact that this MACD line had turned back up. All right, that to me is a sign. It's just a slow moving line. It's hard to get it to make big turns. So once this had gone down for over a year and then turned back up, I'm sort of the opinion that we've got a little bit of time to the upside to play. Now, the other thing I like to look for is how strong are the sellers during a down leg like this. And we never got the sellers above 25. So I've got some things that I like about that. Now, if we start to isolate what's taking place on the price pattern, we get this strong move to the upside, good bottoming bar, a hesitation bar, and then a strong bar to the upside, and then we get an inside bar on the monthly. So we've made this move off the low. We hit this resistance from the 18-month line, but instead of really having a bad month, this turns into what I would consider to be a pause month right near the moving average, not showing a lot of selling. And we can go and look at the volume and see that the volume was not all that heavy. Once we hit into this resistance zone, we hit the big round number at 100. We had made a pretty good move to the upside, hit the 18-month. And so this is actually an encouraging sign to me. Now, I wouldn't trade off this time frame, right? Because we have a declining 18-month, but will it prevent me from taking a trade? Is there any sign of major resistance? Like if we were coming up to a ledge like this of massive resistance that we hadn't hit before. Remember, we hit this here, we tested it here, went back up here, tested it here, and then we didn't get a lot of resistance. So I'm starting to think this 100 level is starting to weaken. But the point I'm trying to make is there anything really glaring on this time frame? And I just don't see it. We have an encouraging signs and momentum, and we have an encouraging sign in the last month. So we've got that. It doesn't prevent us from taking this trade. Now look at the weekly chart, because this is really where you're going to build your case. We get a nice move off the low, strong move. We get a pullback, a minor pullback, and then we make a nice move to the upside. Look at how the MACD is confirming. Look at how the ADX is confirming, and look at the volume pattern. You see that? So we can start building a case and say, okay, I've got MACD confirmation. I've got ADX confirmation. All right. I've got volume confirmation. And then we can also say, hey, we've pulled back to a rising 18. All right. That's MA confirmation. All right. Now I've put the overlay of the fib grid starting at this last pivot low. This is not a pivot because you never made a new pivot, because this was a big bar and all we did was trade inside of it. Never really had a reversal top. So this was the last pivot. We take that to pivot high on this pullback, which is the area we're trying to identify. And we come back to the 50% retracement. But look at, more importantly, what I really want to focus in on is look at how we're going about doing it. In fact, let's just start and say we've got this confirmation here, here, and here, right? That's on the up move. But then on the pullback, we do want to look at it from a standpoint of how strong the sellers look on a daily chart. And if you notice, the size of these bars are small and then they shrink. So these aren't really that big. And this isn't all that big, but then they start to get smaller. And then we get a move down into the fib grid area, 38 to 50% retracement, and we get a tail. We get two tails formed in that zone. So this is a perfect price pattern that we want to look for if we're building a case. All right, we know we've got momentum in our favor. We want to see if the price bars are telling us that that we've got something that could make a move to the upside. And this might not seem like a big thing, but I see this over and over again with the people I'm working with. They kind of ignore like big selling bars. And those are where you're really going to run into problems. Not that it won't eventually go up, but you could try and get in too early and then it comes back down, makes a new low before you actually get in. So you got to be very careful looking at these bars. And I'm trying to find ones that are orderly 3 to 5 bar pullbacks coming into a 50% retracement with a rising 18. And it's nice to have the supporting evidence of the 40 right underneath. I also like to see that this is a pinch play developing where the MACD is holding the signal line. Okay, I like to see the fact that green and red are still have a lot of separation here. And that ADX is actually holding 25 throughout the pullback. So, I mean, those are all bonuses in terms of building a case. If you want a high win rate, these are all the types of things that you're going to need to have in your favor. Now, on the other side of this, let's look at the daily chart for entry. And one of the key things that we want to point out is that the entry has to take place after earnings. I think if you want to increase your win rate, you will not play the game prior to earnings, like within 4 to 5 days of earnings, if you're swing trading or intermediate term trading like this. If you play this game, it's just, you just never know what you're going to get. All right. So this made it through earnings and then turns back up. Now, we've got a couple of things that we should focus in on this area to build our case for a winning trade or increasing our win rate. And the reality is we're trying to reduce our loss rate. So this area here where we get a declining phase, this pullback is showing low ADX strength. So yeah, red is above green, but the sellers are just not that strong because ADX can't get above 25. In fact, it doesn't even get above 20. So very weak selling from my standpoint, the way I would view it. This is telling us, and it's not a small thing, we're crossing the zero line that we don't want to be in a big hurry and play the first move to the upside. Now, in this case, the first move crossing back above the 40 would have been okay, but we went in the zone and came out. But the reality is that when I see this pattern, I tend to be a little bit more defensive. I'm waiting for, not defensive, but I'm waiting for a little bit more confirmation. We get that in the form of two lower highs here and a pinch play here after this crosses back above the zero line. And notice how we also have green DI working on our favor. So if you start to do this, now you're really building a case for a potential winning trade. Now, sometimes you have to pay up for confirmation, right? I mean, we're not getting as good an entry, but I'm looking for a high probability trade, and I would view it as low risk, not low price is what we want to focus in on. So find a point where all the time frames are in sync. And I will make one more point. We did have this big round number. So what I'm saying is that I'd be taking this trade right here, but we have this big round number, but notice how we had already tested it. If it was an untested area, so we tested it here, and we got very little selling on that, I'm willing to play this just below this 100 mark after that happens, especially with everything, all the other evidence that I have in place. So these are the types of things you want to kind of focus in on to increase the win rate and build a case or evidence in your favor, and just start jotting them down. See if you can build it up to 6 or 7 things in your favor. If you have that, I think your win rate will go up. All right. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and subscribe. And just briefly, my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. If you have an interest in the individual package, it has about 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special video for that package, and lots of education is on that service. That's what I'm trying to do, and in conjunction with all the research that I'm putting out. And also, you do have access to the trading course or the trading school, because there's 2 different courses now. All right, let's go ahead and get into the individual stocks now. Okay, let's start out with the Nasdaq Composite. I want to follow up from last week. So we got a pullback on the daily chart. Well, first of all, the weekly chart is showing that it's gotten stretched away from the 18-week line, and we've been looking for an opportunity to maybe see if this wants to pull back. But the fact of the matter is that we've got good momentum confirmation here. So I'm inclined to believe a pullback in this is going to represent an opportunity, maybe near that 13,000. Now, the question is, are we going to pull back right now? And if we go to the daily chart, we've gotten a fairly orderly pullback here, but notice what's taken place. We've got the MACD crossing down through the signal line, and we're pretty stretched away from the zero line. And then also we have a little DI divergence, and we did finally show signs, a little bit of selling showing up, and you can actually see it in the volume as well. So when I see this pattern with MACD, and I know that I've got a strong reading in ADX, I'm not necessarily looking for this to fail. But what it might do is come down and bounce off, or maybe it's already starting to bounce up and then come back down and test again. It usually takes the shape of some kind of a W when I see this pattern, when it's extended away. So we don't necessarily have to be in a big hurry here. Now, the easier way to look at this is to go down to your hourly chart, and we've got an ABC corrective pattern developing, and we have clearly crossed down through the zero line to the downside versus something like this where it can turn much quicker. Typically when I see this, it's not necessarily bearish, right? But it's not as I have found that it's not worth trying to be a hero and being in really early. I think you can wait for it to make a move up and then come back down and then look to play the first high or low, or the first upturn after that. So in a lot of ways, you can look at it from a MACD standpoint, maybe see a crossover and then it'll come back down in the second crossover, or a pinch play or something like that could be the setup I'd be looking for on this. So I'm not necessarily saying to definitely wait for a pullback on the weekly chart. But if we never get a setup on the hourly, it's by default we're going to end up breaking the 18 on the daily, and we're going to see the MACD on the daily as well starting to come in some more, and we'll probably get a more of a corrective pattern on the daily chart, not just on the hourly, but it'll spill over to the daily, and then we're going to see a better pullback on the weekly. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you, do really good analysis instead of trying to predict. I don't necessarily want to predict here. I just want to say, look, I don't really want to play, or I don't want to be real aggressive here. The only way I'd be aggressive with this trade here is to go down on a small time frame, knowing I'm down 3-4 days in a row and I'm still in a pretty strong trend. I'm going to go down to a smaller time frame and try and trade back up to the midpoint of this move from this high to this low. If I want to do that, there's no problem with doing that. I think we've come down to a level where we're probably going to start to see some buying stepping in the short term, even if it's for a day or two. But I don't think that's the start of the bigger move. I think it's more likely that it ends up doing something like that. So that's what I'm waiting for as a new trigger if I'm looking at it weekly, daily. And if we end up breaking the 18 and that line rolls over, we're probably going to get a zero line test on the MACD daily, and we'll get a better opportunity on the weekly chart, which is really what I'd like to see based on the fact that the 18-month is declining. All right, let's look at Bitcoin because I think it's interesting. I don't know if anyone had watched the show maybe a month or two ago. I was talking about this 18-month line, and I said that I knew we were hitting this resistance area, but the question wasn't, it was kind of like, how does it react here? Does it sell off hard and re-break the 25 level and really come down? Or does it just be resilient? And I think it's doing that. It's being more resilient. We're not seeing a lot of selling pressure. So what I want to do is say, okay, I know this has a declining 18-month line. So if I'm playing this, I've got to play it off the weekly chart, and it's a weekly trend and not a monthly trend. It's not a long-term play. It's an intermediate-term play using the weekly and the daily. And we can see the nice pullback. It was pretty orderly to the 18 area with the 840 rising underneath. Got a little bit of a crossover here, but really the red stayed below the green. So the buyers on the ADX basically stayed in command here. You can see that it did correct back, but we never got a lot of selling strength to the downside on this weekly chart. And I know this crossed over, but this is the first crossover after getting back above the zero line. So I kind of view that as a zero line reversal. And then obviously this is kind of ignited, I think, in a fairly unique way because it did trend to the downside and then it ignited pretty strongly. But if you notice, we had MACD turn up here, come back down, make a double bottom. It was actually divergence in MACD because this made a dramatically lower low versus this, while this was making a slightly higher bottom. So this is a very volatile stock, and the ADX on the smaller time frames, a lot of times you're going to get these spike patterns that are just not, the readings on this are not going to help you that much in terms of entry. So you got to be careful about that. Bottom line is, I think this is a pretty nice pattern developing here, and it probably wants to work its way up, maybe up towards 35 or 40. So I thought I'd mention this because it does look like it wants to bust through or get through the 18-month line. And again, that would mean a trading move, an intermediate term trading move coming for Bitcoin. I actually like the look of Riot blockchain better. I like the looks of this. This is one I highlighted this week for my subscribers. Look at the orderly pullback. Look at the momentum condition, much, much stronger. I like the volume pattern here. And then really orderly pullback to a rising 18 above a rising 40. And we're getting this pattern where we're crossing back above the moving averages here after some overrun. But the ADX pattern works a lot better on this index than it does on Bitcoin. I think we could get some kind of a little higher pivot low, maybe a push up into this resistance at 12.5 and look for a little pullback or something like that where it's holding the moving averages as your entry point. Something I'd be watching, I think, just the way this is developing. It looks pretty interesting. for the first time in a long time. I mean, we can go back quite a while. This is the first time we're getting back above the 18-month line. We obviously straddled it here, and then we tested it and kind of held, did it again this month. And the sellers never really took over. And you can see that in the volume pattern as well. So anyway, I like the looks of this, definitely worth watching. Now, let's talk about a couple of requests that came in. Look at Delta Airlines. I mean, this has been a long time coming, where we've been waiting for real signs of improvement. The last times we got back above the 18-month line, we still had the declining 40. We still had a lot of price resistance in place that hadn't really been tested yet. So I kind of view it like this. There's people buying up here, right? And you get this harsh sell-off to the downside. Well, a lot of these people didn't get out. And then you get an opportunity to rally back up here. And this is the first opportunity for these people to basically get their money back or get close to that, and then they exit. So that's real resistance. But now that we've done this, I think personally, this is a lot less meaningful. You've gone through a couple tax loss selling seasons. I think we can work our way through and make a little bit more upside. So the problem we've got with this right now is that it's extremely overbought. And in the process of doing that, it's showing really dynamic momentum. And even the momentum on the weekly chart is showing nice improvement. So I'd just be looking for some kind of a pullback towards the 18-day. If it doesn't in too violent of a way, then we might be looking for a pullback towards the 18-week, which would be ideal. If we get that opportunity, I think I'd be watching for that. Really interesting, though. Okay, look at Google. So Google made the move to the upside, broke the downtrend, okay? Tested the low. So this is the 1, breaking the trend line. 2 is testing the low. 3 is coming back up through here, all right? That's kind of like really strong evidence that the trend has shifted back to the upside. And in the process of doing that, we got back above the 18-month. MACD curled and turned at the 0 line. Now we're looking for the first pullback towards the 18. This last time it was a little abbreviated. It didn't quite make it all the way. See if we can get a little bit better pullback. Now that the 18-day has rolled, we should get a 0 line reversal, get this MACD down closer to 0, and get this to show at least the 18 and the 40 coming together. So we want to be on the lookout for that, I think, is the next real opportunity. Now, if it comes in really violently and it starts to just re-break the 18-week and the MACD starts to cross over and we see red starting to show up, then this could just be forming a big trading range. All right, so we don't have to assume anything. Do good analysis, and then you can determine whether this is a good setup or not. All right, that's how I would handle this. CCL, another one. Look at the weekly pattern here. I mean, and I do view this more like a weekly chart, a weekly setup. Look at the way this cupped around and busted out to the upside. Look at the new momentum showing up and the volume pattern, good. MACD clearly getting back above the 0 line. And we're getting some separation in MACD and its signal line, which I really like. So in the process of doing that move to the upside, we're crossing above the 18-month line. Now, it's not a monthly setup. If I look at this on a monthly, I don't see any kind of a pattern setup. Now, on a weekly chart, if it pulls back, this is going to look really, really good, right? So I'm trading it off the weekly, using the daily for timing and risk control. And I'm recognizing where risk comes in or where resistance comes in on the monthly chart. Yeah, we've got a little bit at the 40-month, but I would say the bigger issue is up when we get up towards like 23 to 25, something like that. So I do think there's room to play this if we get the proper entry on a pullback. I do like that as an idea. Okay, Intel. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. We have this pattern of improvement on the weekly where we're cupping around, showing signs of improvement. We get a nice pullback. We even get a pinch play with the MACD. No real sign of selling pressure anymore on this last decline, right? So we're looking for a move back to the upside. The problem is, what do we hit here that causes this to sell off and run into problems? And that's the 18-month line. So, you know, these stocks that have a declining 18-month and are below it, that's kind of the target. Once we get up there and we straddle it for a little bit, we can trade to the upside even though this is declining. But this one never got through it. So this has more work to do. It's got a lot of support at 30. I think it's done a lot of, it's made a lot of improvements here. I just don't think it's ready for any kind of really dynamic move. And obviously, most guys are taking advantage of this rally. Look at the size of those bars compared to the bars going up. And there's really no improvement in the momentum on the daily chart. So don't get too excited about this one yet. Look at PLTR. Now, this is one where we want to be looking at the weekly chart again, because we came out of this base in a dynamic fashion. Look at the size of this volume. It's huge, huge volume pouring into this. Now what we want to see is lesser volume over the next 2 to 3 weeks as this pulls in a little bit closer to support. Don't expect it to come back to the 18, especially if this is still rising, but we could get this to just take a breather for a couple more weeks, pause, maybe pull back, and the way it's happening on the daily chart, it might just take a little bit more time. And but I would be sitting back and watching this and being patient, seeing if I get that opportunity. Another thing you can do is looking for this RSI 5 on the weekly to get down to under 50 again. All right, if that happens over the next few weeks, it's another one that's probably worth watching. American Express is kind of caught in a range here. We don't really have a whole lot going on. There's not a lot of new momentum coming into this right now. But I do like the improvement in the short-term pattern. This is definitely showing signs of new buying stepping in. I just don't know if it's strong enough to really work its way back up through 180 yet. We'll probably get another test of that, though. We could see a trading move up towards that level. Let's take a quick look at TEL. Look at the dynamics of this. Crossing back above the 18-month after being in between the 18 and the 40 for over a year. And then look at the strength of this move. You can see it on the daily chart starting to show up. It's a low ADX breakout play. We're looking for some kind of a pullback a little bit closer to 130, something like that. I think that's what I'd be watching for. Thanks for watching the show. If you have any stock requests, send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.